What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Khamzat Chimaev talks about crypto scam. Khamzat Chimaev and his team continue to take heat over allegations they knowingly participated in a pump and dump crypto scam, but Boers insists he knows nothing about crypto at all, and that further, he is not to blame for what went down. Chimaev has made plenty of headlines in the past for his exploits inside the cage, and in more recent years, the Chechen stars often made news due to being ill and withdrawing from fights. But more recently, the 30-year-old came under fire after he and his team reportedly called on folks to invest in a crypto coin named Smash, right before the coin's value completely tanked. As a result, fans and crypto bros alike were quick to accuse Boers of scamming people out of their hard-earned money. Well, since the scandal made headlines, Chimaev spoke with Aslanbek Badayev. The undefeated fighter proceeded to pass the buck, pun intended, on to his manager. Well, my manager, you can say, acted stupidly, and I also made a mistake in this crypto. I don't understand crypto at all. I trust my manager. Like any other athlete probably doesn't know what crypto is and how it works. I don't know for sure. I don't even have time to look at what it is. Not surprisingly, the internet has had plenty to say about Chimaev's denials. Here are just some of the responses that went out via X. Yeah, blame it on someone else. He 100% knew what was going on. LOL, he scammed his audience. He should be in prison for international fraud. Everyone who fell for this scam deserves losing money. I don't feel sorry for them. He literally asked his fans about crypto right before the coin was announced. He was testing the waters. He does not care about you. Every time there's a rug pull, it's never the fault of the person, it's always someone else. How convenient. So what do you think? Were Chimaev and his manager just duped by fraudsters unwittingly? It'll be interesting to see whether this impacts Chimaev's reputation and brand on the long term. Back in 2020, hardly a day would go by without talk about Boers and his pending meteoric rise. But due to his extensive health issues and relative inactivity, it seems like buzz around the undefeated fighter has dropped off somewhat. Could this controversy make that worse? Up next, Michael Venom Page breaks silence on Ian Garry rumor. Before and after the UFC 303 scrap, Ian Machado Garry raised eyebrows by claiming Michael Page's camp had offered his training partner 10 G's for insider information. But according to Venom, he would never ever fork over cash in such a situation. Garry and Page traded verbal shots through interviews and social media leading up to their fight, but Garry generated considerable buzz when he claimed Page's team had offered his teammate 10 grand to learn how he was preparing for the fight. Well, since the bout, which saw Garry record a unanimous decision win, MVP spoke with Michael Bisping. When asked about Garry's accusation, the vaunted striker quickly shot down the idea he would pay someone for info about an opponent.
I would never give up $10,000 for anything. This is why I make weight every time. I ain't giving away that kind of money. This is why I've never missed weight, bro. You think I'd ever give that? Listen, I come from an area where I was never making that kind of money. So I would never give that away for some information on him. For somebody like him, I wasn't gonna pay too much attention to anything that he's gonna be saying. So I was just focused on just hyping up the fight as I normally do. You know, let him talk a little bit and then fire back, and then that's it. I didn't really care about all the other nonsense.
Now, of course, anything is possible, and maybe Page's camp did try to get some insider info, but given Page's comments here, and especially because of how lackluster the fight played out, it seems pretty unlikely, no? What do you think? Now let's take a look at Kamaru Usman predicts Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad. Kamaru Usman knows all too well what it's like to face Leon Edwards in the octagon. So on account of his past history with the current welterweight champion, it shouldn't be surprising to hear he's favoring Rocky at UFC 304. Edwards continues to prepare for his third title defense at the July 27th event when he battles surging contender Belal Muhammad. Since Edwards dropped the collective jaw in the MMA world in 2022 when he KO'd Usman with a Hail Mary head kick at UFC 278, he's gone on to defeat Usman again, as well as Colby Covington. Well, more recently, Usman was a guest on the Anik and Florian podcast. The former welterweight king was asked to weigh in on Usman versus Muhammad, and Usman offered this take.
It's an interesting fight. Both guys are talented in both ways. Leon, I would say the best thing about Leon's very sharp in his movement, in his quick twitch. is very sharp. Belal can just go like that, to where Leon can start out really, really hot first round and then it kind of dips. And that's what I think is very interesting in this fight, because both guys are much improved. Leon, of course, is going to be walking around with that extra 30% swag of I'm the champion now. I'm going to lean towards the champion Leon here, because he really impressed me with how he handled all of the pressures and everything dealing with our last fight in London, England. So to be able to deal with that pressure of everyone hometown wanting you to excel and be great at it, just lets me know that, hey, it's something that he can deal with.
Even if you're a big fan of Belal's, you probably have to admit that Usman is making some solid points here. Not only did Edwards go on to defeat Usman for a second time, when many people and their dogs were predicting he wouldn't, he went on to defeat one of the toughest outs in the roster, the aforementioned Covington. But what do you think? Will Edwards here and still following the headliner for UFC 304, or will Belal extend his awe-inspiring 10-fight undefeated streak? Now, let's dive into Curtis Blaydes reveals plan for Tom Aspinall fight. Ahead of UFC 304, some people predicted that Curtis Blaydes is going to be shooting in on Tom Aspinall more often than Joe Rogan says the word compromised. But according to the explosive heavyweight, he's going to be using various tricks and weapons from his toolkit. Blaydes has been tapped to fight the interim champ at the July 27th event, after putting away Jailton Almeida in vicious fashion this past March. The two fought once before in 2022. But the word fought isn't all that accurate, since Aspinall quickly trashed his knee in the fight. Well, more recently, Blaydes spoke with Yahoo Sports' Kevin Iola. When asked about Aspinall and the fact that he's a well-documented threat standing and on the mat, Blaydes said the following.
Oh yeah, when I go in there with a guy like him, a guy with all the skills, he doesn't have an obvious hole. You just have to be organic and be opportunistic. If the takedown presents itself, go for it. If you're able to fake the takedown and get an overhand or a hook, go for that. You just got to be opportunistic, and a part of that is always being in the right positions. That way, if you're not in position, you miss those opportunities. And I just want to always be in position.
It's certainly true that much of Blaydes' early success in the UFC was on account of his powerful takedowns and nasty ground and pound, but he's also demonstrated he has ridiculously heavy and sneaky hands. So it's going to be fascinating to see how the fight plays out. Next, UFC reveals big money move for the Apex. If you're one of the people who's been hoping for even less fight cards to go down at the UFC's Apex facility in Vegas, well, it looks like you may be a bit disappointed by this next story. Over the last few years, the Apex has hosted seemingly a gazillion UFC events, especially during the COVID pandemic when arenas weren't open for business. More recently, the UFC has started holding more fight night cards on the road again, and Dana White has said the promotion plans to do more of that moving forward. As a result, many have wondered if Apex cards were going to become even less frequent. Well, recently, Ken Hathaway from the MMA Roadshow and MMA Junkie reported that the UFC is far from shuttering the Apex. In fact, the company is spending a truckload of cash to improve and expand the facility. UFC Apex doing some expansion, making room for things such as more restrooms and a box office. A couple of the major sticking points for future events at the venue seem to be getting addressed. Opens the doors for many more events to take place in the space. So it certainly doesn't look like the Apex is just going to be designed for, say, the Dana White's Contender Series events moving forward. But to be fair, with more people attending Apex cards, now the environment is far from what it was a couple of years ago. Jake Paul fires back at Conor McGregor's comments. Recently, Conor McGregor took another sizable poke at Jake Paul, and it wasn't long before the YouTube celebrity turned boxer fired back at the notorious one with force. Paul and McGregor have traded verbal jabs in the past, and there's always been a lot of buzz about the two possibly boxing at some juncture. But ahead of Paul's boxing match with UFC vet turned BKFC king, Mike Perry, their war of words has really kicked off. Well, as you've likely heard by now, not long ago, it was announced that McGregor has purchased a piece of BKFC. At a recent BKFC press conference, the former UFC champ did his best to hype Perry, as well as take another shot at Paul.
Look at what has happened to Michael Perry, one of our big stars here, the king of violence he titles himself. And he's had such a rise in the sport. Now he's up against a little of a thing in a fight this weekend that we're all rooting for him. But this is the real deal.
During a pre-fight presser for Saturday's fight, Paul was, of course, asked about McGregor's comments. The polarizing star fired back with this.
Well, first of all, he's big up in the BKFC, but you're going to see what I'm going to do to their best fighter on Saturday night. I'm going to embarrass their whole entire league. This guy has no skill. Those are just brawler, street fighter dudes who have no idea what the sweet science is. And Conor McGregor can say what he wants, but he won't fight me either. So
there you have it. With McGregor still not having signed a UFC extension and down to his last 2 fights, could we see him and Paul throw hands, say, sometime in 2025? Watch Jake Paul against Mike Perry this Saturday, July 20th, live only on DAZN. Buy the pay-per-view now using the link in the description. Sign up to a 12-month DAZN plan and get $10 off your pay-per-view and the first month free. UFC updates. Okay, now let's take a look at some of the recent scraps UFC matchmakers have booked for the promotion's upcoming schedule. After exchanging verbal jabs online and via interviews for a little while now, it's been reported by Marcel Dorf that Aljamain Sterling and Movsar Evloev have agreed to fight at the UFC's October 5th card. The current expectation is that UFC 307 will go down on that date in Salt Lake City, Utah. So that's a nice addition to the event, which will feature the former bantamweight king in Sterling against the rising featherweight commodity Evloev. And if you're a hardcore MMA fan and follow KSW, then you're probably familiar with light heavyweight Ivan Erslan. Well, recently it was reported that the Croatian fighter has signed with the UFC. Not only that, Dorf is reporting that Erslan will throw down with Ian Cutelaba at the UFC's upcoming September 28th card in Paris. Finally, Dorf also relayed via social media that Chidi Njokwani will fight Jared Gooden at the UFC's October 12th Fight Night card. The location for the event has yet to be announced, but it's expected to take place at the Apex in Vegas. Joe Rogan sends a warning to Sean O'Malley ahead of his fight with Merab Dvalishvili. According to Rogan, Merab is the worst matchup for Sean. Here's what Rogan had to say.
And I want to see Sean O'Malley versus Corey Sandhagen. That's an interesting fight to me, if he can get past Merab.
You think he'll beat O'Malley?
He's the worst matchup for Sean. The worst matchup on paper for Sean in that division is Merab. Dude, Merab is a scary character because that motherfucker never gets tired.
He got a big heart, huh?
Oh, his heart is enormous, man. He's unstoppable. Every time he fights, he gets better. Merab is an animal, man. What he did to Henry Cejudo, look at that.
Henry, right?
That is crazy. He picked him up and he walked over towards where the UFC people were and then slammed him. Slammed Henry Cejudo? Olympic gold medalist? Who the does that? I was like, I can't even believe this is happening.
Top comments. Alex is a true champion inside the octagon and out. Much respect to the champ. The more I see of Alex Pereira, the more I like him. Has a great sense of humor the way he trolled Izzy. And seeing him shave the young cancer patient's head and get bleary-eyed tells me he has compassion as well. Alex's stock is rising, not just as a fighter, but as a person. Khamzat ain't worth it-ish, and we will never see him live up to what he said he will do. His best days are behind him. Also, the people saying he didn't run from Whitaker are because Khamzat was back training days after he got scared and ran from Robert. UFC should be ashamed they gave O'Malley Fighter of the Year over Alex for how many cards he saved on short notice and how fast he took his opponent out. Our Fighter of the Year is Alex.